She had not eaten since Tuesday. It was now Thursday morning, and Tasha Cole was standing in courtroom 7 of the Clarkfield family court in a bright teal blazer she had ironed 3 times the night before because she needed at least one thing in her life to be smooth and without wrinkles. Her hands were steady. Her face was calm. She had spent 7 years learning how to look calm no matter what was happening inside her. Inside her, right now, was a storm. The case had been going on for 4 months. 4 months of paperwork of Troy's lawyer, Glenn Sparks, talking over her attorney in that slow, oily voice that made her teeth clench. 4 months of sitting across a table from the man she had married, the man she had cooked for, prayed for, built a life with, and watching him look through her like she was furniture. 4 months of Zoe asking every night when they were going home, and Tasha saying, "Soon, baby, soon," when she did not know if that was even true. Troy wanted the house. He wanted the car. He wanted half of the savings account she had built before they were even married. And most of all, Troy wanted Zoe. Not because he loved Zoe more than anything, though he would say that if you asked him. He wanted Zoe because he knew that was the one thing that would break Tasha completely, and Troy had always known exactly where to press. The morning had started badly. She had arrived at the courthouse to find that Glenn Sparks had filed a new document overnight, a document she had never seen. Her own attorney, a well-meaning but overworked man named Arthur Reed, had not seen it either. He was whispering to her now, standing at their table trying to explain what was in it. "It's an affidavit," Arthur said, keeping his voice low, "from a neighbor, claiming she witnessed a verbal altercation between you and Zoe last September." Tasha stared at him. "That never happened." "I know. We'll challenge it. But it's in the record now." She felt the room get smaller. The neighbor they named was Mrs. Gallagher, the woman who had lived 2 doors down and had always smiled at Tasha at the mailbox. The woman whose cat Zoe used to pet through the fence. That woman had signed a paper saying she had heard Tasha screaming at her own daughter. It was a lie. It was a clean, careful, deliberate lie, and someone had paid for it. Judge Lorraine Webb called the court to order, and for the next 90 minutes, Glenn Sparks built his case like a man who had done this many times and enjoyed it. He spoke about Tasha's working hours, about the sublet she and Zoe were now living in, about the affidavit, about the stress that a working single mother placed on a young child. He said the word unstable 4 times. He said it the way you say a word when you want it to stick. Tasha sat straight. She did not react. She had learned that reacting was what they wanted. But the truth was that the room really was getting smaller. She had not slept more than 2 hours in 3 days. She had not eaten because food tasted like nothing, and sitting down to eat felt like time she did not have. She had been running on black coffee and the deep burning need to keep Zoe safe. Her head had been aching since the night before, a low persistent throb just behind her eyes, and her hands, which had been so steady when she walked in, were now very cold. Judge Webb called a 15-minute recess. Tasha stood up. She meant to walk to the water fountain by the door. She meant to splash her face and take 3 slow breaths and come back and sit down and fight. She had a plan. She always had a plan. She took 2 steps, and the floor came up to meet her. There was no warning, no dizziness, no moment where she thought, "This is happening." One moment she was standing, and the next, she was on the hard tile of courtroom 7 with her teal blazer pooled around her and the sound of someone calling her name from very far away. She heard Patricia's voice. Patricia had come to the courthouse to sit in the gallery and hold space. That was the phrase Patricia used, hold space. And now she was the one on her knees beside Tasha saying her name over and over, high and frightened. She heard Judge Webb's voice, sharp and in control, telling someone to call for medical. She heard Troy's voice, somewhere above and behind her, saying something she could not make out, and she thought she heard Glenn Sparks say something under his breath, and she thought, even half-conscious, that they sounded satisfied. The paramedics came quickly. Tasha was aware of being moved, of a blood pressure cuff being fitted to her arm, of a bright light, of being lifted onto a stretcher. She tried to say something. One of the paramedics, a young man with a calm face, said, "Ma'am, please don't try to speak right now." She thought about Zoe. Zoe was at school. Zoe did not know. Zoe was safe. She closed her eyes. The last thing she felt before the ambulance doors closed was the warmth of Patricia's hand gripping hers, and Patricia saying, low and fierce, "I've got you. I've got you, Ada. You hear me? I've got you." She was taken to Mercy General Hospital, 12 minutes from the courthouse. The ER was busy. A Thursday morning 2 weeks before Thanksgiving, and the waiting area was full. But the paramedics had radioed ahead, and she was taken through quickly. Her blood pressure was 84/52 on arrival. Her pulse was weak. She was severely dehydrated. Her glucose was at the floor, and the triage nurse noted stress exhaustion in red pen on the intake form. She did not know any of this yet. She did not know anything yet. She was in Bay 4, and she was asleep. And outside in the corridor, a tall man in dark blue scrubs with early gray at his temples glanced through the glass panel in the door on his way past and stopped. He was a vascular surgeon named Dr. Nathaniel Holt, and he was not her doctor. He was heading to the 3rd floor for a post-op review. He had no reason to stop. He stopped. He looked at the intake sheet clipped to the outside of the door. Female, 34, collapse, suspected stress exhaustion and dehydration. He looked through the glass again. She was lying very still. The IV was running. Her color was not good. He stood there for a moment. Then he went in. If you are watching or reading this and you have ever had to fight for something that was yours while feeling completely alone, please leave a comment below. And if you want to know what Dr. Nathaniel Holt did when he walked into that room, make sure you are subscribed, because what happens next changed everything for Tasha. She woke to the sound of soft voices. The room was quiet and white and smelled like antiseptic and something else. Something warm, maybe tea. The light came from a lamp near the door, not the overhead lights, which meant someone had turned those off deliberately. She noticed that first. The second thing she noticed was the man in the chair. He was sitting a few feet from her bed with a tablet in his hand, reading, not looking at her. He was wearing dark blue scrubs, and there was a lanyard around his neck with a hospital ID she couldn't read from this distance. He had dark hair with gray at the sides, and a quiet, still way of sitting that made him seem like someone used to waiting. Patricia was on the other side of the bed, asleep, sitting up with her green coat over her shoulders like a blanket, her head tipped back, mouth barely open. Tasha tried to sit up. The IV tube pulled slightly. She made a small sound. The man in the chair looked up. "Don't rush," he said. His voice was low and calm, not unkind. "Where?" she started. "Mercy General. You're in room 204. You've been here about 3 hours. He set the tablet down on his knee. "I'm Dr. Nathaniel Holt. I'm a vascular surgeon here. I came through your bay in the ER when they brought you in, and I stayed to make sure the team had what they needed." She blinked. "You stayed?" "Yes." Patricia stirred, heard Tasha's voice, and shot upright. "Ada." "Oh, thank God." She was already leaning over, touching Tasha's face, checking her the way she always checked her, the way a person checks someone they love. "You scared me half to death." "Half to death, Ada?" "I'm okay," Tasha said. "You are not okay. You collapsed in a courtroom." "I'm okay now." Patricia sat back, but kept hold of her hand. She looked at the doctor with the kind of look that meant thank you, without saying it. Dr. Holt explained what had happened in the way that doctors explain things when they want you to actually understand and not just nod. Her blood pressure had been dangerously low. Her dehydration was significant. Her glucose was almost non-existent, and her body had simply reached the end of what it could do on nothing. He used the word exhaustion 4 times, but none of the 4 times was the way Glenn Sparks had used it that morning. He said it the way a person says the name of something real. "When did you last eat?" he asked. She thought about it. "Tuesday. I had half a sandwich." Patricia made a sound that was not a word. "And sleep?" "I've been sleeping," she said. Then, because he was looking at her with those quiet blue eyes behind those glasses, and he clearly did not believe her, a little. "Right." He wrote something on the chart. "You're going to be here tonight, and probably tomorrow morning. The IV will run through the night. We need to get your levels up before we talk about anything else." He paused. "Is there anyone you need us to call? A family member?" "Her daughter is with my sister," Patricia said quickly. "I already called. Zoe is fine. She doesn't know what happened. Tasha closed her eyes briefly with relief. Good, Dr. Holt said. He stood up, capped his pen, tucked the chart under his arm. He moved toward the door. Then he turned. For what it's worth, he said, and his tone was very even, very straightforward. Collapsing is not something to be embarrassed about. You ran out of fuel. It happens to people who have been carrying too much for too long without asking for help. A short pause. The 4 is your help right now. Let it work. He left. Patricia watched the door close and then looked at Tasha with wide eyes. Who is that man? I don't know, Tasha said. Is he always like that? I don't know him, Patricia. Well, he stayed in that chair for 2.5 hours while you were asleep. I know because I was here for most of it. She tilted her head. He didn't have to do that. Tasha looked at the door. No, she said quietly. He didn't. She slept through the afternoon and most of the evening. When she woke up at around 7, there was a tray of food on the side table that had not been there before. Not the regular hospital tray with the pale soup and the wrapped crackers. This was food from somewhere that had flavor. A proper bowl of chicken broth, thick and warm. A bread roll, still soft. A small cup of orange juice. A container of yogurt. There was a note on the tray in neat slanted handwriting. Better cafeteria, 2nd floor, staff section. You're allowed it. Eat all of it if you can. N. Holt. Patricia was awake again, standing by the window, scrolling her phone. She looked over when she heard the crinkle of the tray covering. That was here when I came back from the bathroom, she said. He must have brought it. Tasha looked at the note again. Then she picked up the spoon and started on the broth. It was the best thing she had tasted in days, and she did not say that out loud because she thought if she did, she might cry, and she was not going to cry tonight. She ate everything. Dr. Holt came by again at 8:15, which Patricia said was clearly not standard doctor hours. He checked her chart, checked the IV levels, asked how she was feeling. She told him better. He said her blood pressure was coming up, which was good. He said she should expect to feel weak for a few days and that she needed to take that seriously and not try to push through it. I have a court case, she said. I know. He said it without judgment. But you can't show up in court if you're unconscious. She almost smiled at that. Almost. He asked her a few standard questions, the kind doctors ask. Any pain, any dizziness, any nausea? She answered them. And then, because the room was quiet and Patricia had gone to make a phone call, she said, "Thank you for the food." He looked up from the chart. You saw the note? Yes. Good. He closed the chart. It wasn't much. It was, she said. It really was. He nodded once, the way a person nods when they believe you but don't want to make a big moment of it. Then he said good night, and he left, and Tasha lay back against the pillow and thought about a man she did not know who had sat in a chair for 2.5 hours and brought her food from a better cafeteria, and she thought that the world was strange, and sometimes the strangest things were the kindest. She was kept for 2 nights. The second day, Dr. Holt came by in the morning during what Patricia informed her was his actual rounds, and then again in the afternoon, which was not rounds at all. It was just him, stopping in. He brought her a cup of tea the second time. He sat down in the chair he had apparently adopted as his. He had his tablet again. He asked how she was feeling. She said better. He said good. And then, instead of leaving, he stayed. They talked. Not about medicine, not about the case, just about things. She asked about the hospital. He told her about the vascular unit, about the kind of surgeries he did, about the specific satisfaction of a procedure that went the way you planned it. He spoke about it the way people speak about something they genuinely love, not performing enthusiasm, but just showing it plainly. She told him she was a paralegal. He said he had guessed lawyer. She laughed a little at that, the first real laugh in weeks, and said lawyers had better shoes. He looked down at his scrubs and said that was probably fair. She asked him if he ate lunch. He said yes, usually at his desk. She asked alone. There was a small pause before he said yes. She said she was sorry. He said it was fine. But she noticed the way he said fine, the same way she said okay when people asked how she was doing. The same way fine and okay meant something else entirely. She was good at reading people. 7 years as a paralegal trained you to hear what people were not saying. She did not push. She just noticed. Patricia, for her part, was a disaster of curiosity. On the morning of the second day, after Dr. Holt had come by for what was now clearly not a purely medical visit, Patricia sat in the chair, folded her hands in her green coat, and looked at Tasha with the expression she used when she had thoughts she was absolutely going to share. "He is interested in you," she said. "He is being kind," Tasha said. "Both things can be true." "Patricia." "I'm just saying." She held up both hands. "I've been in this hospital for 2 days. I've watched the nurses watch him come in here, and I have seen their faces." "He does not do this with other patients?" I asked. Tasha stared at her. "You asked the nurses?" "Just one." "Casually." Patricia smiled, which meant it had not been casual at all. "He is well liked. He is known for being good, thorough, serious. Not known for sitting in patient rooms in the afternoon with a cup of tea." Tasha looked at the ceiling. "I'm just noting the data," Patricia said pleasantly. "He's lonely," Tasha said, surprising herself with how sure she sounded. "I don't think he has anywhere to be, and I don't think he's used to that." Patricia went quiet for a moment, then, "That's very perceptive. I've been married to a man who was never lonely a day in his life because he was too busy being selfish to notice anyone else existed." She paused. "Lonely is different. Lonely is someone who keeps checking in because they actually care whether you're all right." Patricia looked at her for a long moment. "Ada," she said gently. "I know," Tasha said. "I know. I'm in the middle of a divorce. I know." "I wasn't going to say that." "What were you going to say?" "I was going to say that you deserve someone who checks in." Tasha did not answer. She looked out the window at the gray November sky and thought about Zoe, and thought about the courtroom, and thought about a man who ate lunch alone at his desk and brought food from the better cafeteria and sat in a chair for 2 and a plekti. Half hours because he had decided to. On the afternoon of the second day, Dr. Felicity Monroe, who was Dr. Holt's colleague and clearly a friend, stopped by the room. She came in with a warmth that filled the room immediately. Maroon scrubs, bright smile, the kind of person who made you feel welcome without trying. "I hear Nate's been camping out in here," she said, not to either of them in particular. "Is that unusual?" Tasha asked. Dr. Monroe looked at her. "For him? Yes." She said it gently, not unkindly. "He's a good doctor and a good man. He's also been going home to an empty house for 4 years and pretending that's fine." She straightened. "I'm not here to tell you anything. I just wanted to see how you were doing for myself." She checked the IV, made a note on the chart, smiled at Patricia, and left. Patricia looked at Tasha. Tasha looked at Patricia. Neither of them said a word. That evening, Carol Holt appeared. Tasha had no idea who she was at first. A woman in her late 60s with silver hair and a floral blouse walked into room 204 carrying a small container and looked around with the bright eyes of someone who has decided to arrive wherever they go with purpose. "You must be the young woman Nathaniel mentioned," she said. "I'm Carol, his mother. I came to bring you some of my potato soup. Nathaniel said you were here, and I thought hospital food was not the thing." She set the container on the side table. "Can you eat?" "Yes," Tasha said, too surprised to say anything else. "Good." Carol pulled the other chair over and sat down with the ease of a woman who sits wherever she likes. She looked at Tasha with clear, kind eyes. "He told me you were in a tough spot. He didn't say details. He doesn't share details, never has. But he said you were strong and that you'd had a rough few days." Tasha blinked. "He said I was strong?" "He did." Carol folded her hands. "He doesn't say that sort of thing to be polite. He says what he means." Tasha looked at the container of soup, then at this woman who had come to a stranger's hospital room with food because her son mentioned her, and that had been enough. "Thank you," Tasha said. Her voice was softer than she intended. "Don't thank me," Carol said pleasantly. "Eat the soup." She was discharged the following morning. Her levels were back up. Her blood pressure had steadied, and the attending physician, after reviewing everything, cleared her with a firm list of instructions: rest, food, consistent sleep, and a follow-up appointment in 1 week. No skipping meals, no working past midnight. She nodded at all of it and meant it in a way she had not meant to take care of herself in a long time. Dr. Holt was not on the floor when she was discharged. She did not expect him to be. He was a surgeon. He had a full schedule. She had already decided she would not think too much about the past 2 days, about the tea and the chair and the soup his mother brought, because she was in the middle of a divorce case and she had a daughter to protect, and her heart did not have room right now for anything else. Patricia came to get her, and Patricia, because she was Patricia, brought Zoe. Zoe came through the hospital lobby in yellow boots and a bright blue coat with her small backpack shaped like a frog. And she ran the last 20 feet to Tasha and wrapped her arms around her and pressed her face into her mother's neck, and Tasha held her so tight that Zoe made a small sound like a squeezed toy. "I missed you, Mama." "I missed you too, baby. So much." "Patricia said you were tired." "I was. I'm better now." Zoe pulled back and looked at her with the serious brown eyes she used when she was deciding whether she believed something. "You don't look sick." "I'm not sick, I promise." Zoe appeared to accept this. She took Tasha's hand and they started toward the exit. They were almost at the lobby doors when Zoe stopped walking. Tasha followed her gaze. Dr. Holt was crouched down near the seating area, beside a little girl of about 8 who was sitting on a bench with a scraped knee, crying quietly. He had what looked like a small first aid kit from a nearby station, and he was cleaning the scrape with the careful concentration of someone doing surgery. The little girl's mother stood beside them looking grateful. A nurse walked past without stopping. He had stopped. He was not on duty for this. He was in regular clothes, dark trousers, and a deep blue jumper, the lanyard gone, probably coming in or going out for something else entirely. He had just stopped because there was a child who needed help. Zoe watched him for a moment. Then she walked over. Tasha reached out to stop her, but Zoe was already there, standing beside him with her frog backpack, looking at the little girl's knee with great seriousness. "Does it hurt?" Zoe asked the girl. The girl nodded, still sniffling. "My mama hurt herself too," Zoe said. "She got better." Dr. Holt looked up. He saw Tasha first, and something moved across his face quickly, something warm, and then he looked at Zoe. "Is this your daughter?" he asked Tasha. "Yes, this is Zoe. Zoe, this is Dr. Holt. He helped me when I was here." Zoe looked at him the way she looked at people she was deciding about. Then she unzipped the front pocket of her frog backpack and took out a folded piece of paper. She held it out to him. It was one of her drawings. A house with a big sun above it and 4 stick figures in the garden, all with different colored hair. "That's my favorite one," she said seriously. "You can have it." He took it with both hands. He looked at it for a long moment. "This is very good," he said. He meant it. "I know," Zoe said. He smiled. A real one. Not the careful, professional smile Tasha had seen in the hospital, but something that reached his eyes and changed his whole face and made him look, just for that second, like someone who was not lonely at all. He walked them to the door. Outside, in the thin November light, he asked Tasha how she was feeling, and she said truly, honestly, genuinely better. He said good. He looked at her for a moment. Not long, just long enough. "I know your case is continuing," he said. "If it would help, I know a family attorney. She's sharp and she has a strong record with custody situations. Not that your current attorney isn't good, but I've seen her work." Tasha thought about Arthur Reed and his flustered face and the document he had not seen coming. She thought about Zoe. She thought about the fact that this man had no obligation to say any of this. "Yes," she said, "please, I would be grateful." He nodded. He wrote a name on the back of his card and handed it to her. Margaret Osei. He said she was the best family attorney he knew and that she was available if Tasha wanted to call her. Tasha held the card. "Why are you doing this?" she asked. Not accusingly, just honestly. He thought about it. "Because you're in a hard situation, and I have information that could help, and there's no reason not to share it." He paused. "And because your daughter gave me her favorite drawing, that carries some weight." She laughed a little. He smiled again. Zoe tugged Tasha's hand. "Can we go get pancakes?" "Yes," Tasha said. "We can go get pancakes." She looked at Dr. Holt one more time. "Thank you. For all of it." "Take care of yourself," he said. "Eat real meals." "I will." She walked to the car holding Zoe's hand and the card with Margaret Osei's name on it, and she thought that she would call that number today, this afternoon, before she did anything else. She did. Margaret Osei changed everything within 2 weeks. She was a compact, precise woman in her late 40s who wore her locks pulled back and her red blazer like a person who had never lost a case she cared about. She had reviewed the full file in 48 hours, identified 4 procedural errors in how Arthur Reed had filed the initial response, and called Tasha on a Sunday to walk through a new strategy. She was also, it became clear immediately, not afraid of Glenn Sparks. The next court appearance was different. Margaret filed a counter-motion challenging the affidavit from Mrs. Gallagher on procedural grounds and submitted a formal request for evidence of payment or communication between Troy and the neighbor. Judge Webb granted both. Glenn Sparks lost the smooth ease he had carried since the beginning. Troy, across the table, looked at Tasha for the first time in months. Not through her, at her. She did not look back. But there was still the matter of where she and Zoe were living. The sublet was a single room at the back of a house owned by a woman named Mrs. Park, who was kind but strict and who had been very clear that children were allowed, but noise was not. Zoe had been whispering for 3 weeks. She colored her pictures in silence. She was 6 years old, and she was whispering. Tasha paid the sublet with the money she made at the firm, and the small amount from savings that Troy's preliminary agreement had not already frozen. She was managing, but only just. Margaret had mentioned in their last meeting that Troy's attorney had flagged the housing situation in their new filing. Unstable housing. That phrase again. Glenn Sparks loved a phrase he could repeat. She did not tell Nathaniel any of this. She had been in contact with him only a few times since leaving the hospital. He had texted once to check if she had called Margaret. She had. He had said good. That was mostly it. She was careful about keeping a boundary she was not entirely sure how to name. But Patricia had no such boundaries. Patricia had somehow, in the space of 2 weeks, developed what she called a professional respect for Nathaniel Holt, which Tasha was fairly certain meant she had his phone number and was not shy about using it. On a Wednesday evening, Tasha came home from the firm to find a text from Nathaniel. Patricia mentioned the housing situation. I don't want to overstep, but I have 5 empty rooms in a house I rattle around in alone. My mother is staying through December. If you and Zoe need a proper space while the case runs, the guest wing is yours. There is no condition attached. Think about it. She read it 3 times. She thought about Zoe whispering. She thought about colored pictures done in silence. She thought about a little girl in yellow boots who deserved to be loud. She replied, "Thank you. We'll come on Saturday if that's still all right." His reply came within 2 minutes. "I'll ask my mother to make up the rooms. She'll be very pleased about this." She could hear Carol saying it with a smile, and she found herself smiling too. Birchwood Lane was a wide, quiet street in a part of the city where the trees were old and the houses set back from the road. Number 14 was a large cream-colored house with a deep porch and a garden that had been well kept but had the look of a garden that no one played in. Until Saturday. Zoe was out of the car before Tasha had turned off the engine. She stood on the path with her frog backpack and looked up at the house with enormous eyes. "Are we staying here?" she asked. "For a while," Tasha said. "Is it a hotel?" "No, it belongs to Dr. Holt. We're guests." Zoe considered this. "The doctor with my drawing?" "Yes." She nodded, apparently satisfied with this as a reason to enter a house. Carol met them at the door and swept Zoe into the house with the ease of a grandmother who had been waiting for exactly this. She had made cookies. She had set up the guest room with a small cot beside the main bed so that Zoe could be close to Tasha if she wanted, or have her own space if she preferred. She had found a yellow bed cover for the cot because, she said, Patricia had mentioned Zoe liked yellow. Tasha stood in the hallway of this house and felt something she had not felt in a very long time. She felt held, not by a person, but by a space. By the warmth of it, the order, the care that had gone into making it ready. Nathaniel came home that evening from the hospital, still in his scrubs from a long day. He found Tasha in the kitchen helping Carol with dinner, and Zoe at the kitchen table with her drawing things spread out across half the surface. He stopped in the doorway. Zoe looked up. "Hi," she said. "Hi," he said. "I drew a horse," she said, holding it up. He looked at it seriously, the way he had looked at the house drawing. "That's a good horse." "I know," she said, and went back to coloring. He looked at Tasha. She looked at him. Something passed between them that was small and quiet, and neither of them named it. "Dinner in 20 minutes, Carol said without turning from the stove. Nathaniel went to change and came back in a clean blue shirt, and the four of them sat down together at the table, and Zoe talked the entire meal, and Carol laughed often, and Tasha ate a full dinner for the first time in longer than she could remember. She thought, this is what a house is supposed to feel like. 3 weeks had passed since they moved in. 3 weeks in which Tasha had made a point of contributing where she could, cooking dinners when Carol was tired, keeping the shared spaces neat, making sure Zoe was not a burden. But the truth was that nothing about it felt like a burden to anyone. Carol and Zoe had formed a friendship that operated entirely on its own terms. Carol taught Zoe to make oatmeal biscuits. Zoe taught Carol 3 new crayon techniques. Nathaniel came home every evening to a house that was not empty, and Tasha watched that do something to him slowly, the way water does something to dry ground. Not dramatically, just steadily. They had a routine, not one they had planned. It had built itself. He would come home, she would be in the kitchen or the living room. They would talk about the day while Carol fed Zoe. He would read to Zoe sometimes if Tasha had a work call, the two of them on the sitting room couch with a large picture book between them, his voice low and steady. She was careful. She was always careful. She was in a divorce. She could not be anything other than careful. On a Tuesday evening, 3.5 weeks in, Margaret called. Tasha took the call in the guest room, sitting on the edge of the bed with the door closed. Troy's attorney had filed a new motion. Glenn Sparks had submitted documentation noting that Tasha was currently residing in the home of a male individual, specifically Dr. Nathaniel Holt, with her minor daughter present. The motion argued that this represented a further indication of instability, poor judgment, and inappropriate living circumstances for a child. It used the word relationship in a way that had no evidence behind it but was clearly designed to imply one. "He's trying to use the house," Tasha said. "Yes," Margaret said. "He's fishing. He has no actual evidence of anything improper, but the motion is in the record, and Judge Webb will expect a response." "What kind of response?" "We can address it directly. Clarify the nature of the arrangement. It will hold up, but it does give Troy a thread to pull at going forward." A pause. "There is another option, but it would require something more significant." "Tell me." "If your housing situation were fully formalized, if you were legally and clearly in a stable, committed arrangement, it would close this line of attack permanently. Troy has no other strong arguments left. His entire strategy now is stability." After the call, Tasha sat on the edge of the bed for a long time. She knew what Margaret had not quite said directly. She also knew that it was not Margaret's idea to pursue. It was just information. What Tasha did with it was her own. She went downstairs. Nathaniel was on the back porch. She could see him through the glass, sitting in one of the chairs, a mug in his hands, looking out at the garden in the cold dark. Carol had taken Zoe to bed. The house was quiet. She went outside. She sat in the other chair. She told him about the call. She told him about the motion. She told him what Margaret had said about a more permanent arrangement. And she said it plainly without softening it, because she did not want there to be any confusion about what she was telling him. He was quiet for a long time. She watched his hands around the mug. She watched the porch light fall across his face. She was ready for him to say that this was too much, that it was too fast, that he was glad to help, but this was a step he could not take. She was ready to thank him for what he had already done and figure out another way. He put the mug down on the small table between them. He turned and looked at her. "Tasha," he said, "please be my wife." She stared at him. "Not for the case," he said. "That's not the only reason. I want you to know that. But yes, it would close this, and I want to close this for you. I want Zoe to be safe." He paused. "And I want to have a reason to come home to a house that isn't empty." She stared at him. He held her gaze. He did not look away. The night was cold and still, and somewhere down the street a car went past, and the porch light hummed, and Tasha Cole, who had been strong for so long and careful for so long and alone for so long, sat in a chair on the back porch of a house on Birchwood Lane, and looked at a man who had sat in a hospital chair for 2.5 hours and felt the ground shift under her feet. She did not answer yet. She opened her mouth, and then she closed it. She started. I need to know who you are first. He nodded. All right. He settled back in his chair. The mug steamed between them, and he began to talk. If you are watching this, and you have ever been in a moment where someone surprised you with something you did not expect, something that changed everything, tell me in the comments. What did you do? And if you want to see what Tasha says next, make sure you have subscribed, because the next part of this story is the part that no one sees coming. He told her about Claire first. Her name was Claire Ashford when they met, Claire Holt when they married. They were 29 years old, both starting out, both certain they were making the right choice. He told Tasha this without apology and without drama. He said it the way a person tells a true story, which meant the shape of it was not perfect. We were in love in the way that people are in love when they're young and they want to be in love, he said. We wanted the same things: career, a home, a family someday. We had the same idea of what life should look like, but we didn't really know each other, not the way you need to know someone. What do you mean? I mean that when it was just the two of us, without anything else to focus on, we ran out of things to say. He said it plainly. That's the plain truth of it. We were better at being busy than at being together. He said it had not been dramatic. No great fight, no single moment of betrayal. Just a slow drifting, like two boats on the same lake that gradually ended up on opposite shores without anyone choosing it. She met someone through her work, he said. A man in her field. They had the kind of conversations she and I had never managed to have. She came to me and told me the truth. She did not lie, she did not pretend, she just told me. And I listened. A pause. And then I told her she should go. Tasha was quiet. She was surprised, he said. She expected a fight. She expected me to be angry. He looked down at his hands. But the truth was, I was relieved. That felt like a terrible thing to feel. But it was the truth. I was relieved because it meant I could stop performing, stop trying to be enough for something I had never really been right for. How long ago? 4 years. Do you hear from her? Not really. She sends a card at Christmas. She is well. She seems happy. He looked up. I am glad for that. Tasha believed him. That was the thing about Nathaniel Holt. She believed him. What happened after? She asked. I worked, he said simply. I worked a great deal. I bought this house because I thought I was supposed to have a house, and then I found I had nowhere to put all of it. He looked out at the garden. I have 5 spare rooms and a garden and a mother who visits and a colleague who checks on me and a drawing from a 6-year-old on my refrigerator. She looked at him. You put Zoe's drawing on the refrigerator? Yes. He said it without embarrassment. It's a good drawing. She was quiet for a moment. Then, what do you want, Nate? Not what you think you should want. What do you actually want? He thought about it for a long time. The porch was very quiet. I want to come home and have it mean something, he said. I want someone to be there when something happens, good or bad. I want to read to a child at bedtime and not feel like a guest in my own life. He looked at her. I've been alone for 4 years, and I've told myself it's fine because I have enough. But it isn't fine. I just didn't know what to do about it until 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks ago, she repeated. When you and Zoe moved in. He said it without any performance. This house has been different. I've been different. He paused. I'm not asking you to do something you don't want to do. I'm asking you honestly, with my eyes open, knowing your situation and not minding it, knowing Zoe is part of this and being glad about that. I am asking you, honestly. She looked at him for a long time. She thought about 7 years with a man who had made her feel like she was lucky to have him. She thought about collapsing in a courtroom because she had been running on nothing, carrying everything alone. She thought about a chair in a hospital room, tea from the better cafeteria, a card with a name on it, a yellow bed cover for a cot. She thought about a man who read picture books out loud to a 6-year-old who was not his. Tell me one more thing, she said. All right. If the court case was already won, if there was no legal reason, would you still be asking me this? He did not hesitate. Yes, he said, I would. She nodded slowly. She did not say yes yet, but she did not say no. She said, I need until tomorrow." He said, "Take all the time you need." They sat on the porch for another half hour in a comfortable silence that felt nothing like being alone. And eventually they went inside, and Carol had left a plate of biscuits on the kitchen table. And neither of them said anything more about it that night. He found out within a week. Tasha did not know how. There was a leak somewhere in the court system, a loose word or a careless document, and Troy's attorney came into the next hearing with new energy that told her he thought he had something. Glenn Sparks, in his smooth, deliberate way, moved to introduce the fact that Tasha Cole was now in an active romantic relationship with Dr. Nathaniel Holt, a man of significant means, and submitted that this relationship was recent, rapid, and possibly designed to establish a more advantageous housing situation ahead of the custody ruling. He said she had made a calculated move. He said the words slowly, so that they would land. Judge Lorraine Webb looked at him over her glasses. Margaret rose. Margaret Osei, in her red blazer and her locks pinned back and her 14 years of family law, proceeded to address the court with the calm precision of someone who had been waiting for this. She presented the hospital admission record from November, showing that Tasha had been admitted due to stress exhaustion brought on by the emotional and physical strain of the divorce proceedings. She presented the follow-up records. She presented the timeline of the housing situation at the sublet, the cost, the limitations, the impact on the child. She presented the character references for Nathaniel Holt from the hospital, from his colleagues, from the community board of the medical center where he served as a volunteer consultant. She then submitted quietly and without drama the marriage certificate. Tasha had said yes the morning after the porch conversation. She had said it at the kitchen table over breakfast with Carol pretending not to listen and Zoe drawing horses. And she had said it clearly and without hesitation, and Nathaniel had looked at her with those blue eyes and said thank you, which was not the thing most people would say, but it was exactly the right thing for him to say. They had gone to the civil registry the following day. Simple, quiet, legal, Carol and Patricia as witnesses. Zoe wearing her yellow boots and a bright green dress because she had chosen the outfit herself. Margaret placed the certificate on record and turned to face Glenn Sparks with the specific expression of someone who has won and is being polite about it. Glenn Sparks looked at the document, then at Troy. Troy said something under his breath. Sparks leaned over and spoke quietly. He then stood and said he would need time to review the new documentation. Judge Webb said, "Mr. Sparks, I have reviewed all documentation in this case with considerable care. I have also reviewed the pattern of filings from your office across the past 4 months, which have been marked by a consistent strategy of undermining the respondent's character through unsubstantiated or procedurally questionable means." A pause, during which the room was extremely quiet. "I am prepared to rule." She did. Primary custody of Zoe Cole went to Tasha, full and clear. The house, which had been in Tasha's name before the marriage, was to be returned to her following valuation, with Troy to receive a fair share of the assessed equity. Troy was granted reasonable access and visitation, structured and supervised during an initial period due to the nature of the proceedings. The savings account, which Tasha had built for 7 years, was returned to her in full. Troy stood up from his chair. He looked at Tasha across the courtroom. She looked back at him this time. She held it without flinching. He left without speaking. Glenn Sparks gathered his papers. He did not look at Margaret. Margaret walked over to Tasha, put a hand on her shoulder, and said quietly, "You're done." Tasha gripped the edge of the table with both hands and breathed. Patricia, in the gallery, was completely silent, which was very unlike Patricia and meant she was trying not to cry. Outside the courthouse, in the November cold, Nathaniel was waiting at the bottom of the steps. He had taken the morning off. He had not said he would be there. He was just there. Tasha came down the steps with Margaret and Patricia, and she stopped when she saw him. He was in a deep blue coat, hands in his pockets, looking up at her with that quiet face. "Well?" he said. "Zoe's mine," she said. He let out a breath. Then he nodded once, the way he always nodded when he believed something and did not need to make a performance of it. Patricia swept past Tasha and embraced him anyway, briefly and firmly, and said, "Thank you," into his shoulder. He looked slightly startled, but did not pull away. Tasha reached the bottom step. He looked at her. She looked at him. She thought about all the things that had happened in the past 2 months. She thought about the teal blazer she had ironed 3 times. "Take me home," she said. He smiled. "Yes," he said. "Let's go home." She had already said yes at the kitchen table. But that evening, after the courthouse, after they had picked up Zoe from school and told her with careful simplicity that everything was sorted and she was staying with Mama and everything was good, after Carol had made a dinner that was celebratory without being showy, after Zoe had been bathed and read to and put to bed with both of them sitting on the edge of her small cot until she fell asleep, Tasha found Nathaniel on the back porch again. Same chair, same porch light. The garden was cold and bare, but there was a warmth coming through the glass behind them from the lit-up kitchen. She sat beside him. "I want to say something," she said. "All right. When I said yes at the kitchen table, I meant it. But I want you to understand exactly what I meant." She looked at her own hands for a moment. "I didn't say yes because I needed your help. I know that's how it looks from the outside. The divorce, the housing, the case. It could look like I made a sensible decision." "I know it wasn't that," he said quietly. "Let me finish." He nodded. "I said yes because I watched you for 3 weeks and I saw who you are. I watched you fix Zoe's bike when you didn't have to. You didn't make a big thing of it. You just did it. I watched you read to her when I was on a work call, and when I came in, you were doing the voices, and you looked embarrassed that I'd heard. And that was the most human thing I had ever seen." She paused. "I watched you eat breakfast alone every morning before I started making enough for 2. And I watched what it did to you when I started making enough for 2. He was very still. "You are a good man," she said. "Not good like a performance, good like it is the only way you know how to be. And I have been around enough people who are not that to know how rare it is." He looked at her. His expression was the quiet kind that meant more than most people's loud ones. "I married you because I wanted to," she said. "That's all. That's the whole thing." He reached over and took her hand. Not quickly. Slowly, the way he did everything, deliberately and with full intention. His hand over hers on the armrest, warm and certain. "You're going to have to let me say something now," he said. She almost smiled. "All right. I have been alone for 4 years, and I told myself that was manageable. I told myself I was enough for my own life." He looked at their hands. "And then you and Zoe came into my house, and I realized that I had just been very good at getting used to less than I needed." A pause. "I'm not good at saying things. I'm better at doing them." "I know," she said. "So I'll say this once, and then I'll mostly just show you." He looked at her. "You are the best thing that has happened to me in a long time, you and Zoe. And I don't take that lightly." She held his hand, and they sat on the porch in the cold, and the light from the kitchen fell warm across the boards. And somewhere inside, Carol was singing something quietly to herself, and it was the most peaceful Tasha had felt in longer than she could remember. She thought, "This is what it is supposed to feel like." She thought, "I am going to let myself have this." In the morning, Zoe came downstairs in her pajamas and found them both at the kitchen table with coffee, not talking, just sitting, and she looked at them for a moment with her serious brown eyes. "Are you happy?" she asked, directed at neither of them in particular. "Yes," they both said. Zoe considered this. Then she got the cereal from the cupboard, the one on the shelf she had been allowed to designate as hers, and she climbed into her chair and started pouring. "Good," she said. "Can I have a dog?" Nathaniel looked at Tasha. Tasha looked at Nathaniel. "We'll discuss it," Tasha said. Nathaniel was already smiling. 6 months later. The garden at 14 Birchwood Lane had not looked like this since the house was first built. There were white chairs set out in rows across the lawn, and flowers, real ones, not the stiff, formal kind, but the loose, colorful kind that looked like someone had planted them with joy. There were fairy lights strung between the old trees that weren't needed yet in the afternoon light, but would come on golden when evening arrived. There were tables with food and a cake that Carol had made herself. 3 layers, cream cheese frosting, covered in small yellow sugar flowers. Zoe had chosen the flowers. Of course she had. Patricia was giving a speech. She was standing beside the cake table in a bright green dress, holding a piece of paper she had clearly written on carefully and was now departing from freely, which was exactly Patricia. She was talking about the first time she had seen Nathaniel in the hospital corridor and how she had simply known, and Tasha, standing at the edge of the garden in her red dress with gold earrings that had been her grandmother's, laughed genuinely at the word known because Patricia had in fact spent 2 weeks pretending she was not trying to matchmake. The guests laughed. Carol laughed loudest. Nathaniel stood beside Tasha in his deep blue suit, his handlight at her back, listening to Patricia with the expression he got when he was finding something funny but was not going to say so. Judge Lorraine Webb was seated in the front row. She had been the one to sign their marriage certificate, and when she had seen their names on the paperwork, she had looked up over her glasses with a very slight smile and said, "I was wondering how this would end." She had been the first person they invited. The ceremony itself had been short and warm. They had written their own words. Nathaniel had taken a long time over his, and in the end had said very few of them, which was right. He said, "I will be here, every morning and every evening, whatever you need. That's my promise." Tasha had thought she would not cry and had been wrong. She said, "You made me believe again that kindness is real and that it lasts. I will spend my life making sure you never forget what that's worth." Zoe, standing between them as flower girl in a yellow dress with a basket of petals she had distributed with great seriousness down the garden path, reached up during the ceremony and took one of each of their hands. Nobody told her to. She just did. In the late afternoon, when the food had been mostly eaten and the cake was cut and Patricia had finally been persuaded to stop giving speeches, Nathaniel found Tasha near the old oak at the back of the garden. She was watching Zoe run across the grass with Carol, both of them chasing something. A butterfly, maybe? Both of them laughing. He stood beside her. "She wants a dog," he said. "I know. I found a breeder, golden retriever, 8 weeks old." She turned to look at him. He was watching Zoe and Carol with an expression so quietly full that it made something ache in the best possible way. "You already looked into it," she said. "Yes." He glanced at her. "Is that all right?" "Nate." She took his arm. "It's very all right." He nodded. Then, "I'm going to need her to name it something reasonable." "She's going to name it Princess Frog." "Yes," he said. "That's what I thought." They stood together under the old tree while the afternoon light fell soft and clear across the garden, and Zoe doubled back and ran straight into Nathaniel's legs, wrapping her arms around them. And he reached down and swung her up in one smooth movement, and she shrieked with laughter. "Dr. Dad," she said, settling into his arms, pointing at something in the tree above them. He did not correct her. He had not corrected her the first time she said it 2 months ago, when she had come to find him after a nightmare and he had carried her back to her room and sat beside her until she fell asleep. He had looked at Tasha in the doorway and she had seen something in his face that told her exactly when he had stopped being a lonely man in a too large house. It was that night, or maybe it was the day Zoe handed him a drawing, or the day he brought tea to a woman he did not know and sat in a chair that was not his. Maybe it was before any of them knew what was happening. That was the thing about kindness. It did not announce itself. It just showed up, quietly, and changed things, and by the time you understood what it had done, you were already different. The lights came on in the trees as evening arrived. The garden glowed. Tasha stood in her red dress with her gold earrings and her daughter in the arms of the man who had sat beside her when she had nothing, and she thought that this was what hope looked like when it actually came through. Not dramatic, not loud, just warm and steady and real. She took Nathaniel's free hand. He held it. And at 14 Birchwood Lane, for the first time in a long time, everything was exactly right. Thank you for reading. If this story moved you, please share it with someone who needs to be reminded that kindness is still out there.